And if you think about stuff, also, you just end up. It's like politically, I guess I'm kind of bit liberal and a bit lefty, but I kind of all I can see is, well, that's part of the story. You're left wing, or they, well, this thing of like the right wing protects the group. I mean, they seem to me to be a bit like the baddies in some ways at the moment, but the right wing urge is to protect the group, and that's really important because sometimes we are groupish creatures, and you protect the group, but that can happen at the expense of weaker individuals. So then you've got the liberal urge, which is to protect those weaker individuals, which is really important, but that can happen at the expense of overall stability sometimes. So both sides are like, part of the story. And if you take the nasty individuals out of it, or people that you don't like, the key thing where you find truth and humanity is in the dialogue between the sides, right? Not just in one side or the other. Yes. So how do you begin to ally yourself to any strong political motivations? I just don't. Yeah. I just never settle down on any kind of opinion or whatever that is, motivation with enough force to do anything about it, because I'm quite happy just to go, oh, it's complex and, difficult. There's no easy answers. And if there are, I certainly don't have them.
You might be a bit enlightened in a very sort of unassuming way, because I've noticed a lot of people that are vibrating on a higher frequency, they tend not to get too worked up about sort of the mechanics of the materialistic world. Like sometimes I feel like, you see some glorious guru swathed in saffron, like hanging out with Bill Clinton or whatever, and I might think, well, can't you, but look at the things that have happened and the complex, and I sense that, like when I think about that, the sort of the spectrum of current, say, British political life, or to a degree American political life, the two sort of worlds I know, a bit about, not much, I would have to say. Like I can strongly identify with people that feel that they've been cheated and swindled and overlooked and ignored and are angry. And similarly, my general sense is be compassionate and loving and forgive. So, and also though that would of course have to extend to people that you disagree with. Otherwise, what it is just a different type of tribal. We did a
really interesting experiment. I did the show Sacrifice, which was which is also on Netflix now. So it's the last TV show that I did, and there's quite a lot. At the start of the show, there's this audition day, and there's like 100 people and I choose the guy I'm going to use. But we did a lot on that day, which never made the show. And one of the things we did was. So the room is actually divided between people who identify strongly left-wing and strongly right-wing. So we did some things. Could you get people to change their opinions, and what would it take? Based on the idea that one of the reasons why the Conservatives, or at least right-wingers, tend to have, Republicans and so on, tend to have an electoral advantage, is that they hit a lot of moral trigger points for us. And there's a great book called The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt that goes into this. Our feelings of, because they're about protecting the group, so that taps into our instinct for things like preserving authority and loyalty and so on. There's a bunch of sort of moral triggers that they tap into, whereas the liberal urge is mainly about compassion. That's sort of one note that tends to get hit. And because generally like Republican and right-wing rhetoric tends to hit a lot more like moral notes, they tend to have a bit of an electoral advantage and they get voted in more. However, so the point of this experiment is by priming people with different with these sort of instincts, could you get them to change their socio-political views? So if you're protecting the group, which is the right-wing instinct, you're very sensitive to threat, right? Threat to the group. And so the first experiment we did was we flashed up loads and loads of images. Everyone's wired up to these clever things that can read their, micro this and sweating and so on. And sure enough, every time it sounds silly, but you flash up a picture of a puppy or a kitten or something that would make you feel compassionate, all the left-wingers fire up, right? They physiologically fire up. Nothing really happens on the right-wing side. When it's pictures of witches and ghosts and monsters and aliens, all the right-wingers, because it's
stealing our jobs.
It's threat, right? So that was like interesting, and it sort of was exactly what the research said would happen. So then we did this experiment, which is also part of written up in Jonathan Haidt's book, which is where the idea came from, of So if you take your right wingers, who's if the basic idea is one of threat, that's kind of what they're predisposed to feel, right? Is they're more prone to feeling threat from outside. What if you made them feel invincible? So I just got them to imagine that they had a superpower that meant that they were impervious to harm, and just
You got them to imagine it, or you hypnotise them?
no hypnosis. Literally, just I'm reading a script. They close their eyes. All of you just imagine this, and now fill out the questionnaire. And the questionnaire is asking for their socio-political views. They've answered these same questions before, worded a bit differently, so it's not obvious they're repeated.
Oh, cool.
But we've got their answers from before, and now we look at their answers after that 5-minute priming exercise to feel imaginatively less threat, right? To feel invincible, and their answers are more left-wing. We did the opposite thing with the left-wingers by inducing disgust, which is another kind of which is why all this, the sort of racist rhetoric and so on historically has always been tied in with
Rats.
language. Yeah, rats, dirt, and so on, vermin.
Parasite, swarm.
So we literally had fake sick on the floor as they came in. There was rubbish and crap everywhere. The room stunk. We were apologising, saying there'd been an accident before, but we had to do this really quickly, so ignore the smell, sorry. They come in, I give them a brief visualisation about what happens to the body after you die and how it decomposes, and then they fill out the same questions, and they give much more right-wing answers. And it was really...
Enough for them to cross camps?
Yeah, well, pretty much, yeah, absolutely. They're giving... It's a big difference. It's a big difference. So the interesting thing there is, we like to think that our religious, our political convictions are rationally come by, that we weigh up the issues, we weigh up the...
Brilliant.
Yeah, but they're not. They're these gut instincts that we have to things like threat and disgust and so on, which colour everything else. And the rational mind follows after.